All right, guys. We're going to take a look at this beautiful Performer RPM Airgap. There's the casting number. And what we're going to do is we're just going to do, it's going to be relatively quick. We're going to go over our stock head numbers, right, which you guys have seen before. And then what happens to them when we put that beautiful manifold on. Take a look. Not bad down low, right? We have a definite loss. Sometimes we get actual flow gains. Now this is the stock valve without a back cut, and it has my 770 carb on it with the K&N snub stack. So that shouldn't be holding it back at all. But take a look what happens, right? We have a head that flows 229 at 500. It knocks it down to 190. Can we do our 400 the way it is? It would need a relatively big cam to do that, and that is not what the customer wants. He wants to do this with a relatively short duration cam. So in order to do that, like DV says, the better flowing the heads are, the less cam it needs. So yeah, it takes quite a hit, 300. It takes quite a hit in flow. So the next stage was put the completely stock head, stock intake on the first cut on the head. Now, that's considerably different. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so this is our first cut sheet. We got nice pluses all over. In fact, we did pretty good. We got 256 at 500 and 261 at 550. Now we move over, and it went up a little bit. It went from 190 to 203. But it's a completely stock manifold. Now, what I think I'm going to do next is I'm going to attack the manifold. What was really interesting is we didn't talk about the swirl on the other one. I forgot about doing that. Let's go back and take a look at that. Okay, I always think it's interesting, right? This is our swirl, just the cylinder head. Actually, more swirl than we need. And take a look what happens to the swirl when you put the intake manifold on. That is actually a really nice curve. Okay, that's the stock head with the stock intake manifold. Okay? Now, keep these numbers in your head, and we're going to go to the ported head with the stock manifold, and you'll see how much different the swirl is. It's radically different. Like, this is low swirl at low lifts, and by the time we're at 500, we're 1700. To me, that's almost textbook, what you want. Now, let's see what happens when we port the head on the stock manifold. Okay, so this is our first cut flows, and this is first cut with the stock manifold 770 carb. All of them are on number 8, and the reason we use number 8 is because it flows most likely about the worst of any port, because of a couple of reasons, actually. It's got the high H, so it has less plenum volume, and that runner is, the way it's shaped, is not great. So that's the reason I picked number 8. So yeah, our flows went down everywhere just like before, but they're higher than the last one. We're going to show this sheet against the unported head sheet for the flows. But take a look at our first cut swirls, right? Went plus, plus, minus, minus, minus. So much less than the bone stock head. But take a look what happened when you put it on the ported Stock manifold on the ported head. Low, minus, minus in the opposite direction. Dead until we hit 500 and then it kicks up. Okay? Not really as good a curve as we had stock head, stock manifold. But we have more flow. And you know what's really funny is, like, we went from 229 at 500 to 256, right? And then it was 190 with the unported head. We only gained 13 CFM. So we're going to have to do some magic on that intake. Okay, this page is stock head, stock intake, ported head, stock intake. So you can compare these right to each other. Okay, this is the one that had the really nice swirl curve that I liked. This swirl curve is not as good. But we are up everywhere. Well, actually 69 is, that's equal. Plus, 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 plus. All good, right? Up everywhere. But not a huge difference considering the big difference we got on the flow of the bare head. You know what else I think we're going to do is I did another video where we talked in detail about this Performer RPM. I wonder if I should put it on this video. I might as well, because the damn phone hasn't been saving my videos and I'm doing them over and over. It's really annoying. I have to figure that out. I apologize if I repeat myself, guys, but doing this over and over, I'm losing my mind. So what I did is I, to the best of my ability, measured the length of all the runners. Okay? I don't want to mark up the manifold because it's pretty, so I just scribbled them on my scribble sheet. Okay, 2 is 6.5, 4 is 6 1/4, 6 is 6.5, 8 is 8 inches, 1 is 8.5, 3 is 8, 5 is 8, and 7 is 6 3/4. So if you look at it, we have 1 6 1/4, 2 6.5s, 1 6 7 3/4, 3 8 inch, and 1 8.5. So all of these will have a different tuned RPM. Okay? Now what's the purpose of doing that? Well, these longer ones here are tuned for lower RPM. Those are your low RPM torque cylinders, okay? And the shorter the runner gets, the higher in the RPM band it's going to be tuned for. So you have one higher than the other. And in reality, these may be the same length. I could have goofed that up a little bit too, because not the most scientific method to measure them. But in any case, if somebody wanted to go through and give us an RPM for each of those, and you plot the curves and blend them together, what it winds up doing is it flattens out the torque curve. Makes it a very drivable combination. And these manifolds have a really good reputation of good street manifold, and they pulled well up top. But you know, I've said it before, and I'll be saying it again. You got a lot of guys that like to take a cylinder head that flows like 290 CFM and then put a Performer RPM on it. Performer RPM only flows like 220. Okay, so when you take a head that flows 256 and an intake that flows 220 and you add them up together, think of series resistors, it only flows 190. That's what we've got here. Okay, now let's go over a straight design that I like on this, okay? The ridges in the plenum, I like. What are they for? You guys can answer that. You guys know. The way the plenum is designed is quite good, okay? This is actually very thin. It would be nice if they made this pad a little bit higher, but that limits your hood clearance, right? But they did put a nice radius on it, and you can see our divider. They did a good job on that. you know, and that divider is shaped like that on all of the runners. They're quite good like that. Okay, you guys can see that. Now, the lower plenum is really cool the way they did it. They actually did it more like the Wien design Airstrike. And let's take a look at how they did that. Okay, bottom plenum, you can see those runners go all the way to the center of that plenum. And take a look at the outside. You can see, right, how they come off the runner, have a relatively sharp turn, and head towards the center. It's actually a really nice design. Yeah, we could probably work on this turn a little bit, but it's actually really nice the way it's cast into the manifold. Okay, not the easiest thing in the world to light, but that is that's our number 6 runner. Okay? Very difficult to do because I have to hold the light at the same time. That's our number 4 runner. Same idea. It's actually quite nice the way they did it. Okay, this is our number 2. Number 2 is relatively straight runner. That's our number 8. It's got a little bit more of a bend to it than 2. Okay, this is number 1. Number 1 has a completely different shape. Take a look at how it goes around, and it comes into the plenum at the very end. It comes like straight into the plenum. Let's see if we can see that on the inside. There that opening is right there. See, the other openings are towards the center over here. Okay, I actually like the way it's done. Yeah, those runners are definitely curved a little bit harder. That might be a little bit less flow, and it might be very difficult to port them, as a matter of fact, because that's the lower plenum. You can't even get to those runner entrances probably. I'm going to see what I can do. Do what I can do. Okay, that's number 3. Number 3 is real nice runner, very long, relatively straight. Okay, number 5. Number 5 looks similar to 3, but it's not the same. Right? It's nice and straight, but it has a hard turn into the plenum here. Okay? Okay, you can see how nice they did the floor on our number 7. And that runner is very much like number 1, right? It comes way out and then turns and enters the plenum straight in. Okay, maybe you guys can see that. It's a real nice design. Really don't have any complaints about it, except the plenum should be another inch taller. But you know what happens, that it makes it more difficult for it to fit the bodies. You know, this is an air gap design, so it's taller than most manifolds to begin with. Right? What is the air gap design supposed to do? Well, it's supposed to insulate the runners from the hot oil that's splashing around under the valley. If they were really worried about it, this would be a separate insulated piece, right? These would be divorced somehow. I'm sure that's been done before to keep it much cooler. And the reason you want the cooler charge is a little more air density, right? Get a few horsepower out of it. The air gap design is, I think, good for maybe 3 or 4 horsepower. It's not a huge difference. Another thing I like about the plenum, I like the way the plenum kicks out. If you see how big the barrel is, and the plenum gets bigger, it does the same thing on the lower end too. Hard to see. But this actually kicks out. Plenum should always do that on an intake manifold. Okay, and it should always have a nice radius. The radiuses on the lower H aren't really that great. I'm going to see if I can do a little better on those radiuses. That's going to be tough to get to, though. We'll see how we do. As far as casting quality, it's it's pretty good. It's not terrible. There's plenty of casting flash and crap in every port, but you know, it's what we got. It's what it is. That's why a little cleanup on these goes so far. Okay, there's a good view of that runner. That's a really nice shape. Yeah, it's got plenty of junk in the corners that needs to be fixed, but it's a really good shape. And I can tell certain runners are definitely going to need more work than others. And of course, we're going to. I don't do a regular gasket match like most cylinder head guys do, because I want this hole to be a little bit smaller than the hole in the head, and I do that for anti-reversion purposes. So they may be close within 30 thousandths, but I always like them a little bit smaller. So as far as being straight, you can see this port is a little bit lower. This port is a little bit lower. They could use some work. Okay. All right, guys. I think that's enough for tonight. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good night.